Okay. Welcome to the Truvio Partner Podcast, where we bring together experts from across the Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem to share real world insights. I'm Ryan Meade. Some of you might know me, Vice President of Regional Partner Business Development here at Truvio, and I'll be moderating today's session. So looking forward to it. In this episode, we're going to explore how aligning VARs and ISVs early in an ERP project can drive stronger outcomes, reduce risk, and accelerate time to value. So I'm joined by Rick Wood. So excited to have you with us, Rick, Regional Director of Business Development at Ellipse Solutions, along with Savanna Ball, Savanna Ball.
That's okay.
Also excited to have you here, Savanna. It's good to see you both again. Savannah's the Marketing and Channel Development Coordinator at Ellipse Solutions. And we're going to be talking about how organizations can better define roles, structure projects, and create alignment across all stakeholders involved in ERP implementations. So that's a lot to talk about today. I think we'll have plenty of content. I hope you both are doing well. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
Excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, let's jump in to set the stage for this conversation and start with maybe a little of the broader context for this conversation, right? So maybe you guys could take a minute and talk about why is ERP success so dependent on alignment between customer, VAR, and ISV, kind of those three different segments.
yeah. I can go ahead and start us off if we want. Yeah, between customers and VARs and ISVs in general, those are three different companies who are all trying to align one common goal, which is, obviously make the customer happy. So I think being aligned on that and making sure everyone is having the same ideas and having good communication and starting that project off strong, it's a huge factor in kind of going forward and having success in that overall project with each other. So
Yeah, I think that's really good. Rick, anything to add or?
No, totally agree. I mean, ultimately, the more information and alignment you set yourself up with, the better off the results are typically going to be. So
Yeah.
start early and often, and just make sure that that everyone's communicating, because it's easy to put things in kind of a silo and separate certain conversations from other groups. But there's definitely some things that cross over between ISV and VAR as far as the environment that's there. So definitely make sure that the communication's there. It helps a ton.
Yeah, I'd add probably there's a little bit of responsibility from each party here too, right? Because I think, like I know in our relationship working with you guys, there may be a situation where we're working really well hand in hand, but maybe, the customer is not really doing a very good job of making sure the VAR and the ISV are staying, connected on parts that they might play, or even maybe there's another ISV in play too that has a part to play. So I think it maybe sometimes feels like it's a no-brainer, right? But you really all have to be pretty like specific, strategic, and intentional, I guess maybe is a better word, about making sure you keep the conversation together and keep everybody in the loop.
mhm.
Yeah, there's a number of different situations, and that's the interesting thing. And sometimes you've got an upgrade or an implementation cycle, and sometimes it's kind of a one-off scenario. So there may be different levels of engagement from the partner already. Maybe they're taking more of a reserved role, or as you mentioned, Ryan, there may be other ISVs in the equation. So it could be an implementation or something that's got multiple things to consider. So I think identifying your scenario it's helpful anytime to make sure there's all this collaboration, but identifying your scenario is really important so that you know how to approach it.
Let's maybe not a full step back, but dive a little bit deeper into, like, before we get too far, maybe the role that each partner plays. So like you all are a VAR Microsoft partner. How do you define an ISV, and where do you see ISVs typically create value in the projects that you're implementing for your customers?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times where we're kind of seeing value is where ISVs have solutions that go out of the box of what Dynamics is already offering. So Obviously, Microsoft offers an ERP solution that is perfect for the masses, but it doesn't get into like the nitty-gritty specifics of what each customer is needing. So that's where we kind of see where ISVs provide the best solutions and opportunity to work with there. So making sure we understand what each customer needs based on what industry they're in, that sort of thing, and then bring in a ISV that focuses on maybe AP automation or commerce or tax or that sort of thing. So a lot of the times the right ISV is kind of the difference between, a good ERP system and it's working fine, and then kind of like a great one that goes into the specifics of what that customer is maybe needing. So,
Yeah, that's a great point, Savannah. I think also it's interesting that there are even some VARs that are ISVs as well, where they've
Interesting.
found an industry specific area where there was a gap within Dynamics that they've built out some functionality, or maybe they've acquired someone. So there's a number of scenarios where, the VAR could be an ISV, and it could be the VAR that you're working with, or it could be a separate VAR. So, it's important, I think, to identify who you're working with and set the ground rules properly. And but there's there's a number, and in fact, I think a lot of the VARs in the dynamic space have been around for a long time. I think the biggest thing we see with new VARs is people moving from the BC space into the F&O space or vice versa. I think there's usually some good definition around the viability of a VAR, and there are places you can go to get that validation either through AppSource or through recommendations from other clients or other partners or other ISVs in the community. The dynamic space is a pretty small world, when it comes
Yeah.
to reputation and viability. So, I think just know what you're working with and figure out the operating rules depending on who you're working with. And some ISV providers have multiple solutions, and so
Right.
you could end up in a scenario where give them the time of day to provide information on all the different solution types, because you could be looking at multiple different things and not realize someone you're talking to actually provides more than one
Hmm.
capability that you're looking for, or they could add some additional features that you didn't realize you had in your requirements, but could be really impactful nice to haves that can kind of become a requirement. So um, there's a lot of different types of ways that ISVs can surface themselves.
mhm,
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. In particular, the part about, some VARs actually having some IP themselves, right? They've solved for a gap in the ERP, maybe in an industry that they specialize in. So when you're considering, kind of back to the ISV selection piece, like when you're considering an ISV, or you're coaching, or coaching a customer, what are the types of things that you look for when you're vetting an ISV, right? Or are
mhm.
there things, I guess, tell me more about that, if there's some specific things that you guys look for.
Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I was going to say we'll flip roles here, and I'll go first. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
um, I think the biggest thing is to look and see if they're on AppSource. That's Microsoft's version of the phone book, right? So
Yeah.
they've got everyone
Right.
listed out. You can type in certain descriptions that you're looking for, and different things will pop up. You can put in different filters about what ERP or CRM or other solutions it might be related to, and it'll define whether or not they've got certifications for that particular environment. So that's really important, especially with continuous updates, to make sure that they've gone through all the vetting processes, and they're curated is the term that they use, which is basically certified um, by Microsoft to meet all of the proper criteria, so that their solution will operate functionally within the Microsoft ecosystem. So that's the biggest thing. I mean, um, there's other places, Savannah, you could probably talk about where to find some of the ISVs in person, or, that may be sponsoring events and things like that. But, from a validation perspective, always check with your partners, always check with other ISVs. But AppSource is really the gold standard of being certified and readily available, and something
Mhm.
you're
Yeah,
comfortable with partnering with.
it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of these ISVs, they're implementing with a ton of different ERP services, whether it's Oracle or SAP. So obviously, like Rick said, we're looking for those who have a record and a good track record of implementing specifically within Dynamics, because that's who we are and that's what we do. Obviously within that, it's kind of looking at, once again, their track record of things like case studies and how
Hmm.
many successful implementations they've done with other customers and that sort of thing. I think are all kind of important things that kind of tie together when we're looking at people to work with. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like Rick said, obviously run into a lot of ISVs at these events who are wanting to work with us, and potentially we work with them. Obviously, we're always open to hearing out their solutions and everything like that. It's great meeting all these people and hearing out what they do. So when that happens, we kind of listen to it, see if our customers have a need for it. Like Rick here or other BDR kind of has a good insight into that. And if we feel like we do have a good need for them, we kind of move forward. But if not, we kind of still keep a little bit of a relationship with them, because you never know when a customer is gonna pop up with that solution that they're needing. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ryan, and maybe talk about your experience, because I know that, a great place to find ISVs is at a lot of the conferences and things like that.
Yeah.
So, maybe share your experience there with, that being kind of a
Yeah.
good venue.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think you're right. Like, there's places to go. I think you're looking at, Savannah and I were talking when we were waiting to get in the call. Dynamics Con is coming up. There's different events that are coming up. Directions, North America next week. Summit, obviously, but then there's also a lot of regional events, right? And so a lot of ISVs, not all, are out at those. Definitely the bigger events, I think, attract more. And I don't know, I think it kind of provides a safer space to reach out and kind of at least start to get a sense of who's doing what. I think things like the expo halls are always good to look at. I think folks that we've seen be most successful are willing to kind of take their time and actually like, look, if you just walk down the hallway, it can be really overwhelming, right? Because there's
Mhm.
so many ISVs, AP automation like Truvio, now, Xflow sign up software is now part of Truvio. For example, AP automation is everywhere, right? And so if you don't pause to say, okay, what is it about this one that maybe differs from one of the other ones? Are there other things that they do? I think Ricky mentioned that too. Are there some other things that they might also have that make this maybe sound interesting for me to do a follow-up and get an idea of? But I think I think I'll kind of double down into what Savannah was touching on a little bit. Partner relationship makes such a big difference for us, like as an ISV. When partners have trust and confidence in what we bring to the table, at the end of the day, I think a lot of customers are coming to VARs like yourself and saying, hey, we trust you. You know us better than anybody. I'm looking at this one in option A or option B, or I'm looking for X requirement. Like, how do you help point us in the right direction? I think that can definitely be another validation point. If you're not asking your partner, and listen, we talk with customers sometimes and they're not involving their partner in this conversation. I'm like, you guys have to involve your partner in this conversation. They know you better than anybody else. Why would you not? And you've been in this space, forever.
Yeah, I think the challenging thing sometimes is, there are scenarios where a client does an implementation, and afterwards the partner, either through the partner's program or lack thereof, or the client's choosing, there may not be a lot of interaction after that project goes live, and there should be. It just doesn't
Sure.
always happen. So, but it may be a good time to either re-engage with that partner, or if there's a reason that you're not working with that partner, maybe ask your ISV that you're talking to who they work with a lot, and what they've
Sure.
seen from a success process. And, if they know of anyone that has a really good plan of how to engage and really how to map things out. Because I think, one of the biggest things that we hear, whether it's related to an ISV or another partner, is a lot of times not enough stuff and not enough effort is done up front to really define requirements and to really, go through the process. And either folks want to rush it in or they want to make it simple. And I think the more that you do up front, typically the better off you're going to be. And so if there's a reason you're not talking to your partner, maybe it's okay to go directly to the ISV and not have a partner included, but there's a lot of customizations and things like that that can be in play. So there's definitely good reasons why, if the partner is engaged and there's not a specific reason why there's a disconnect there, to re-engage them and make sure that they're
Absolutely.
aligned with everyone.
Yeah. Absolutely. On that note, so like kind of planning, putting things together, how often or when, I guess is a better way to say it, when do you recommend, if for like a net new implementation, let's say, when do you recommend that customers look at ISVs? At what point in the project do you recommend that they start looking at ISVs to maybe fill some of those gaps we were talking about?
Yeah, I can jump on this one. So I hate to answer, but it depends, right?
Okay, that's all right.
Typically, if we're looking at an implementation specifically, the way that we like to operate is we work backwards. So the way that we would do it is figuring out if it is in fact a true requirement and does it need to be in phase one. That's kind of the initial starting point. And you can't always get there in the first conversation, but once you get to that point, then I think you need to do some more work to figure out what the level of effort is to put something in. And then you kind of work backward there so that you can see when that needs to be put in so that it can be available for testing and all the things around go live to make sure that everything's in alignment with expectations of a successful implementation and go live. So, that there are different ISV solutions that, have generally different timeframes. And even within those, some can be fairly simple and some can be more complex. So the timelines often vary as far as what it takes to get an ISV implemented. So I'd say, it's another reason why starting early is a really good idea, because you can really wrap your head around what your timeline looks like. And, in order to get to that, you have to answer some questions. So that's usually what we say is we try to work backwards from, when we think we would need it to be complete as a partner to really incorporate it into all the kind of end-to-end testing, and then work our way backwards from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, obviously I'm not very customer facing, so I can't speak to the actual implementation process as much. But I think also within this comes a lot of relationship building. Like Rick said, we need to know your process and how you guys work for us to be able to understand when to exactly pull you in. So yeah, even before we might have an opportunity together would be a good time for us to have those conversations. Yeah, continuously communicate with each other, send any updates that you might have on your new solutions or stuff like that. That's kind of my role. And then I kind of rope in Rick or our other BDR or any project managers there so that everyone's aware of how everyone's operating. So
yeah. And Ryan, I think one of the things that happens a lot of times is there's already enough going on in an ERP project that people almost throw that to the side on purpose, like, hey, we'll deal with that later kind of stuff. And maybe there's some justification to some of that, but I do think it's really, as we talk about implementation specific, I do think it's really important to be transparent with your customer and really map out what everything looks like. I think, customers, even though there's a little shock when you really include everything, you're much better off than if you kind of piecemeal it and you're like, oh yeah, that too. Okay. Oh yeah, that too. Which, that ends up adding up over time. And even though it's a little more painful to really scope everything out up front, and it looks like more, it's actually less, because when you start piecemealing that stuff, things always kind of roll up and scope increases and timelines get tight. And then next thing you know, you spend a lot more time and money doing something than if you'd have done it right the first time. So that's always how we try to think of things here, at least at Ellipse, and hopefully, most other folks are as well. And I know that's one of the reasons we've been successful working with you guys is you guys, you don't overstep the bounds of what the partner is requesting, but you want to be in as early as you can so that you can understand, so that you can map things out. And
Right.
another reason it's really important is because sometimes there are requirements that are available through an ISV solution that parts and pieces may also be available via Dynamics. So understanding where those overlaps are really helps folks define where that needs to be built. And that can be a critical component of the timing and the
Yeah.
architecture. So
Yeah.
identifying that's really valuable for a client who maybe has things in two places that don't need to be in two places, or can save some
Right.
money even by putting something in one location versus another.
Yeah. I think all that's really good. A couple things that jump out to me are like when you're defining some of those solution needs, there are some out of the box solutions that Microsoft has that on paper sound like, oh, great, check, that'll work for me. Right. But if you really don't get into the conversation early on about, okay, let's actually walk through what are those requirements, et cetera, and then look at, wow, there might be a gap here. And if you're not having that conversation, then looking to say, okay, how are we going to fill that gap? If that's pushed downstream, then all of a sudden you're in a crunch, right? And then you're scrambling, and then you might be strapped to, well, what's the band-aid fix to this instead of the right fix based on whatever reason, number of reasons. But also the other thing to me is a lot of times we see customers that are moving from an archaic ERP, maybe, or no ERP, or they were on, like you said, maybe moving from Business Central to FO. And there's situations like, okay, in my old world, when we did this 6 years ago, 7 years ago, we fit this need and it took us 2 weeks and and it was easy. So I'm just going to wait and we're going to do this until we get down the road. Well, now your requirements are a lot different. Your business has grown. You want to solve these things in a new way. You want to solve some things you never solved. And so it's really, I think we've seen some customers that are a little bit shocked on how some timeline can take, not because of a prior experience where they had a very, very simple solution that was really just kind of more turn it on, and then maybe need to solve some of their now unique requirements that their business has, or maybe they were even in another business before, So I think that's interesting. If you're not having those conversations early, you could end up really, really seeing an impact.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit it on the head with requirements. I mean, that's what drives everything. And the one of the keys with defining requirements is making sure that everything gets focused on what your future requirements need to be,
Mm,
instead of really what you're doing today. Because
right.
what you're doing today could be limited by something that you've got in process that a previous partner or previous solution designed or had a limitation on. Also, chances are it's 5 to 10 years old, and so much technology has
Right.
changed since then. So it's really important to focus on what is your business need, what's your true requirement moving forward, not just how are you doing it today.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really important. So you have a customer, you have a VAR, you have an ISV. Do you guys talk at all about like how do you manage things or govern things around like scope or roles or responsibilities? How do you coach your customers to manage kind of across those different entities?
So, yeah, there's a couple things that we do. So, one of the things that's unique with us is our PMs are actual former consultants or
Mm,
current consultants. And so they're not just timekeepers and schedule makers. So a lot of times, they're engaged in a lot of the general conversation with what a partner might need and what an ISV might need and what the end user might need. So they're able to really interact
mhm.
and help define what that looks like. So
That's
it
great.
becomes really important when you're trying to size up um, the different capabilities that could be in play, the customizations that may be in play. So I'd make sure that everything that you can do to really understand the environment specifics, to definitely try to dig up and make part of the conversation.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really good. I think probably a next step on that is you start talking about, and you mentioned this earlier, you know, are those folks also helping to drive like some of the testing requirements, specifically as it relates to integration, or how are you guys keeping an eye on what integration and testing considerations should be addressed early?
Yeah, it's a great point, and so one of the other roles that they should have is making sure that a division of responsibilities is identified, so that the PM should be able to identify what roles and responsibilities are going to be tied to the partner, are going to be tied to the end user, and are going to be tied to the ISV, because that becomes really critical for everyone to know who's doing what and when. So, um, testing then, becomes part of the equation of when does this person and that person and these people need to be done with these things so that they can be ready for the next step. And that's why, having someone that understands the engagement structure of the implementation or the ISV project, as well as what level of effort each of those things takes, becomes really important. So the communication there becomes very pivotal.
Absolutely right, and that probably goes pre-project, during project, and post-project, right? Because the goal of this thing is not just to get live, but what happens even after get live. So how you get live well, how do you get live in a strong way, and then also what does post go live look like? You guys spend time thinking about that, or spend time coaching your customers on what to consider as they look at go live and post go live?
Yeah, definitely. So a big part of the engagement process there should be a focus around what the actual go live steps are. What needs to happen for testing, what the go live process is, what the post go live, kind of immediate post
Yeah.
go live is, because there's always going to be some stuff you need to work out just immediately after go live. And then there's kind of a
Right.
continuing support model that typically should be happening. So sometimes the partner can manage that with the ISV. Sometimes the ISV will have their own. Sometimes the partner will have their own. And that's why it's important to have reputable ISVs that have been around for a
Yeah.
while, that have kind of proven that they've got answers to these kinds of questions. And I would, if I'm a client, I'm asking my ISVs and partners if they've worked together in the past, because then you're going to understand that they probably have some sort of a program together to make sure that the things are going to be supported properly, and that where to route certain questions. If certain
Yeah.
things need to happen, it may be something that's going to be sent to to an ISV development team, versus
Yeah.
something might be happening between the ISV and a new product release that Microsoft just put out, or a new continuous
Yeah.
update that needs to be identified. So it can kind of depend on where things go as well. Excuse me.
I think that's really good. Now you're good. Rick, I saw you, it was a regional event. You were doing a little bit of presentation. You seem to be really have your head around some of the Microsoft licensing considerations. And so, if I guess just taking a minute, maybe even to step all the way back, um, are there things that customers should understand about licensing, about contracts, about impact on Dynamics license, again, as they're kind of looking at build versus buy, and some of those, like what functionality works for me, what doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we always encourage with our ISV friends, as well as clients are getting engaged with them, to understand what their licensing model is. As you can imagine, there's folks that have different models, and some of those are based on number of users in the ISV
Yeah.
solution. Some of those are based on number of users in Dynamics. Some of those are being determined by amount of data you're processing, or number of transactions, or in some commerce scenarios, it may be how many sites they have, or there's just a number of different scenarios, depending on what the actual features and functions of the solution are, that can really determine what the costs are.
Yeah.
And then also, there are certain user types within an ISV that can sometimes reduce, usually not eliminate, but sometimes eliminate what licenses are required with Microsoft. So it's really important to understand what the overlap is there. And that's one of the key benefits of folks being on AppSourced, is all those things have to be mapped out in advance so that you're making sure that you're not breaking any rules with Microsoft, because that's the
Yeah.
last thing you want is Microsoft to come in and say, hey, this is you're kind of using a cheat code here, and it's not really the proper way to go about things. So um, it's definitely something you want to understand early. And in some cases for clients, the licensing model may be the only differentiator between
Yeah.
the ISVs based on what they need. Doesn't mean there isn't certain things better here or better there, but if you really just need minimal functionality, it could be that the licensing model could be the biggest benefit to you.
Yeah.
So it's something that I try to understand early. Not everyone has a simple licensing model. Certainly, Microsoft is one of those where the Dynamics licensing model can be challenging and often changing, but it's really important to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really good. Well said. I think, when we look at the different models that are out there too, we try to make that very clear to customers as we're working with them. Here's what to expect from us. Here's where we think, don't pay for what you don't need. Right. So some of those things too, that I think are important to look at what your actual needs are. We talked about needs a little bit earlier. And Ricky, you were talking about how, paying attention to ISVs to maybe see what are some of the things that they may offer that you didn't know you needed, or that you didn't know you could get with one ISV. It's kind of interesting for me. I'll be selfish for a minute with Truvio now coming together with all of these, legacy brands, for lack of a better word, right? Legacy brands. So now Truvio having AP automation, having, expense management, having some control, production planning and shipping controls, also having commerce and kind of bringing some of these engines together. There's other ISVs too who maybe have multiple things going on. How do you navigate that with your customers when you're sitting, when you're looking at how do we actually assess? Do you just look at their requirements and say, okay, here's where we're going to plug and play? Are you educating them to research? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's another nice benefit of having PMs that are consultants as well, because I think they can kind of walk that line between understanding requirements, but also understanding what the ISVs do, so that there's a little bit of show and tell. I feel like that sometimes needs to happen, because not everyone knows all the requirements or all the things that could be available to them. So it's another key reason why doing things early is really important. But I would take advantage of a lot of the expo floors at the conferences, because you're going to get a lot of access to quick conversations where you can get a lot of good condensed information. You're going to oftentimes have folks that are there to do demos and can showcase some of the solution features. And you're also going to have a kind of a combination between business development or sales teams that are going to understand the licensing model and understand, some engagement type stuff. And then you're going to have consultants or product team that are going to be able to talk about, a lot of the way things that are built and a lot of the way that things enhance or replace functionality within Dynamics. So that's a really good way to accomplish all those things. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just nice to sit back and see a demo, and it can be more difficult, with F&O or an ERP system to go, hey, show me a demo of the ERP system, because there's so many components to it. Whereas ISVs get a chance to kind of just shine in their particular focus area or, cross-functional areas. So, you guys, you may be able to have some diagrams that kind of show all the different tentacles that if you've got multiple solutions, where all those plug and play. So, if folks are able to go to a lot of these conferences, even some of the more regional events are good, but the bigger, national conferences are really good places to go get a lot of that information. And even in the sessions, sometimes there's showcases where you can, as an ISV or as a partner, talk about your products or your programs. But most of the rest of the solutions showcases are focused on educational stuff. So, you can learn more about a general topic instead of, how a specific solution approaches it. So, there's a multitude of ways that you can approach it. And I'd encourage everyone to try to get as many of those different options in as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'd also say just that transparency and communication. I mean, again, as we're growing, and I'm sure you guys are the same way on the F&O side, like you sit down and do a demo, sometimes like, well, where do we start? There's so much
Yeah.
that we could talk about today, and you want 90 minutes, right? So here we
Mhm.
go.
Yeah.
Either buckle up or help us, help you, right? Like, help me understand, what are some of the things that are top of mind for you? What are the biggest have to haves, right? What are some things that are maybe nice to haves? What are some things that you don't want to see? Like, okay, cool. We could actually take that off of our list today. And then also, I would encourage people to get curious with your VAR partners, get curious with your ISV partners. Do you guys also do this? Do you know what some solutions are for X, for Y? And that way you can kind of start seeing, especially if you feel like there's some things that are kind of tangential or parallel to what it is that this maybe the partner that you're working with. Hey, this sounds like, is there any chance you also do this? And right, start getting curious a little bit so that you can see what that expanded portfolio might look like, because they might be laser focused on the 5 requirements you sent them, right? Obviously, as partners, we want to slam dunk that demo, right? So we want to get in and make sure we check those boxes, but we might miss some of the other things that they're looking for. So, which, as you mentioned, you can go get curious at an expo hall and some of those national conferences and sessions to see some of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd ask, ISVs what they're going to be at, what events
Yeah,
they're doing. And sometimes they may be at a partner event where the partners got their customers there and their ISVs there. Those are oftentimes great opportunities to really get some direct conversations with
yeah,
the partner and the ISV in the same place. So there's a number of different avenues, and yeah, don't limit yourself to one.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I would suggest if people are going to these events and looking for an ISV or whatever, maybe come to the event prepared with, like, a checklist or something like that,
It's
because
good.
like you said earlier, Ryan, it can get extremely overwhelming when you get on that expo floor, and so having kind of a game plan before you kinda step foot in there, I think can make all the difference sometimes,
Yeah,
to find what you're actually needing, so.
it's really good. All right. So looking ahead, how do you guys see the relationship between VARs, ISVs evolving as ERP projects become more sophisticated, as they become more connected and more focused, like on long-term business value? So that kind of coming together. Any thoughts on that as we look to wrap up?
Right, I'll let you take
Yeah,
that.
yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's Microsoft continues to pump research dollars and innovation into their products, and
Mhm.
every ISV that I know is trying to do the same, and really increase their footprint with their clients so that they can really drive more outcomes. So, as these things continue to grow, I think the biggest thing is being on top of what those changes are and how they impact each other. So, understanding what the new product releases are of the continuous updates with Microsoft, that's really important. Understanding what ISV's roadmaps are is really important.
Yes,
Because a lot of times they may have a requirement that's coming out in your next release. And, you hate to tell them to wait to use your product and implement it a little bit longer, but in some cases that may be the best approach because it's something they specifically need. Um, and, just as some of these things become more complex, some of them become simpler too. Microsoft spent a
that's right.
lot of time trying to integrate things and make all the productivity tools compatible with all the Power Platform and Fabric stuff and all the ERP and customer engagement stuff. And, when that all that architecture has been in consideration for a long time, that ISV realm of how that all plugs in is also getting more sophisticated but more simple. And
That's
so,
right.
I think there's opportunities now where a lot of the stuff that would have been a pretty massive integration in the past, or, different types of integrations that maybe weren't as robust, I think those are now becoming more readily available and
Yeah,
more secure and more rapid, and just there's a lot of different benefits to how those things are tying together now. So the good news is, even though it's getting more complicated, there are a lot of things that are becoming easier, and AI is certainly
yeah,
helping. And I think there's, still some unknowns and still, some initial conceptions and misconceptions of how AI
Yeah.
can or maybe can't quite help. And there are some things that you can do that maybe take more effort to set up the AI than is worth it for the outcome. But it's really important to be on top of that stuff because
Yeah.
things are changing very quickly, and there's some tools out there that are really helpful, and there's some stuff right around the corner that we still don't know yet. So,
That's right.
it's just make sure whoever you're working with has always got one eye down the road, to make sure that they're taking all the things that are coming and making sure they're
Yeah.
compatible and ready for it.
It's really good.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Rick. I think with AI, yeah, everyone's kind of trying to stay on top of it, and yet it's moving so fast that you're almost a little behind as well. But I think in the future, with ISVs and VARs, you're going to see a lot of, like Rick said, maybe having our agent interact with your agent in the future and then automate together for that process. Like Rick said, it might take a little bit more to set up, but in the future, it might make the process go smoother. So that's what I'm kind of envisioning for down the road, a little bit, but and how these relationships will kind of look. But
Yeah. And the things that technology couldn't solve for, or was really hard to solve for in yesteryear, could be really easy today. And they're getting, probably easier in the future. I'd always recommend customers start with the things that are the heaviest burden to you today. Where are you doing the most manual work? Where are you spending the most time or the most money? Let's see if there's something available, that can actually help you solve that or reduce the noise a little bit. But at any rate, that's awesome. Rick, thanks so much. Savanna, thanks so much for being a part of this. Thanks for being a great partner, first of all. Just let me say that. Thanks for being a great partner. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for jumping on the call today. We're thankful that you're taking the time. We know everybody's time is really precious. And for everybody that tuned in, thanks so much for tuning in to the Truvio Partner Podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you a clearer perspective on how strong VAR and ISV alignment can support more successful ERP implementations and long-term value. So if you want to connect with us, obviously, jump on LinkedIn, check us out at truvio.com. You can reach out to Rick, Savanna, or myself at our email also. I'm sure you know how to get in touch with us or hit us up on LinkedIn if you want to talk more. Thanks so much, everybody, for being a part of today.
yeah, thank you, Ryan. Thanks for
Thanks,
inviting
Ryan.
us.